You might not go today. You might be the last one. Well, you're gonna have to be there. I don't care if you might not need you there, but I think.
I'll be there.
I think it's gonna, I think well, I mean, look, I wanna get it done today, I really do. For obvious reasons, I just wanna knock it out so we can move forward. Yes, he just got here and his board. Sit down. Can you tell you what? Oh, my computer. Did you ever get the identity of the person that pulled this airport video? We do need that. Today, we do need it.
No, I asked, my lieutenant was on that.
Okay.
She has a contact. Yeah,
We need it. Do you know if that's the dad? Because I want to introduce myself to him.
The judge.
But do you know if he can
Mr.
hear us?
Howard, can you hear us?
Like, he doesn't, he should be. Yes, yeah, that way you can see me, but at least, yes, I do want to acknowledge it.
Hey, Danny? Alan, can you see us?
Yeah, I can see you fine.
Okay, the woman waving to you is Noah. She's the prosecutor.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm doing well. I just wanted to acknowledge that we see that you're here, and we did ask the judge for it to be live streamed so that you could be here. So again, as I always say to families in this circumstance, I hate to meet you under these circumstances, but I did want to introduce myself in some form since you're not here with me in person. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's your right to be present, and they have the courtroom set up like this now because of the pandemic. So I did ask for her to make that accommodation. She and the judges seems great about that. Okay, all right. Well, we're going to be getting started soon, but that's why I wanted Haynes to call you. All right, you're welcome. Take care.
January was super busy early. Continue that pace from 7, but since the now I've seen.
Oh my God. Yeah, if it ever gets warm, it's just weird. Like
Has it been slow on your guys' end, or are you seeing kind of a lull?
So I've been, since this case reassigned to regular homicide. I keep in this case because of our involved in this case. She got asked Jennifer about that in terms of the fails that got out. The shootings have not gone down. It's terrible.
We had some really high.
Yeah.
But we did the previous 10. And 21 we had some really high.
Did you see the news about the Ruger case? Well, that's because I just signed with this kid who killed his old grandmother. 19 years old. Grandma who took care of him his whole life. It's had me busy the last week.
Oh, no.
I'm not catching the rumors.
Yes. We got lucky because he violated Heather and we were able to keep him in custody even though he would have technically timed out. Because and then yeah, they can see. I mean, I don't know if he wants to be. He just would be nice if he's.
Yeah. Hey, I just want you to know that your face is on like a 65-inch flat screen TV and stuff.
So if you want to turn your video off.
So I don't know when the court begins, if that's gonna happen, but you might be able to shut your camera off. I mean, and I don't know if the judge will do it either. I'm just telling you so you know, Denny, that if somebody comes behind you on screen or something like
Yes.
right now, you're currently the marquee of the court. look up where you see where it might say, like on mine, it says live. Or you might be camera signal.
It's a video, it was a stop video, just click on that.
That stop video is the top one, stop the whole
No,
thing.
it stops us being able to see it.
No, just stops the listening, it just stops us from being able to see it.
Yep, so hit that, and now it should just click on.
Yes.
That video just stops.
So this is here. No, I'm sorry. My client's wife is she the potential witness?
She may be a potential witness, that is right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a potential witness.
Not today, but.
She may get it too, and I don't know when she comes in here. I'm assuming it's- Yeah, yeah. Okay. Try YouTube, try it on. Yeah, try it on yourself.
Pardon?
You're gonna have quite the gallery.
Yes, that's my email. Okay, understood, understood. What do you expect?
No, I mean, the gallery.
That's what I'm saying, expecting a lot of family.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it.
I've seen a lot of people, I didn't know
Yeah,
what their role was.
yeah, that's. I guess I'll remember when I remember. Once it's redone, it's here, it's back. All jokes aside, we want to hear you. Did you see that? Yes, okay, yes, so you know what he's done. I don't know that he's. Oh, this is my question. Yeah. As an FYI, I called Dan because they distribution.
It was good. It was good. Actually, I called over here before I came because on the map it showed a lot of power outages in this part of town, and I wanted to have power outage here. Because I live on the east side of Detroit Drive. 94. Sometimes.
All rise. Bridgeport District Court is now in session and will.
You may be seated. Okay. Are you ready? This is 210960FY, State of Michigan versus Robert Merritt. May I have your appearances, please?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Doe Alquishi. My P number is 82089, appearing on behalf of the people.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Jonathan Weiss at P 74620, also on behalf of.
And good afternoon, Your Honor. James O'Donnell, Neighborhood Defender Services, P 42585. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Merritt. Mr. Merritt, could you give the judge your name?
Robert Merritt.
Thank you. Today is the day and time set for the live examination in this matter. There is count 1, homicide, murder, second degree. Count 2, operated while intoxicated, causing death. Count 3, reckless driving, causing death. Are the people ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any preliminary matters, ma'am?
Yes, Judge, I would ask for a mutual order of sequestration with an exception for my officer in charge who's currently present in the courtroom, and to my left, Corporal Keith Haynes.
And Judge, with that in mind, I have had a person who, my client's wife, who came to the scene. She came today, but she's now sitting in the hall.
Thank you.
And Judge, with respect to that order of sequestration, he is a witness that will be testifying at the exam, so I do want that placed on the record.
On the record, this court makes exceptions for the officer in charge. I'm sorry, Mr. O'Donnell, you were starting to say?
I'm sorry, that officer's name is?
Keith Haynes,
Thank
that's the
you.
officer in charge.
Thank you.
Judge, also preliminarily, I believe we have some stipulations that we established at the last probable cause conference. I don't know if you want me to place them on the record now or when we open our proofs.
You can place them on the record now. I made note of them when we were here on March 9th.
Okay, Judge, first, we have a stipulation with respect to the post-mortem report that was conducted in this case. That's going to be People's Exhibit 1. And if you will allow me, Judge, I can read in only the relevant portions into this record.
Before we do that, I will note that there are a considerable number of people in the courtroom, and although our building is open to the public, we expect everyone to act with the proper decorum for the court. My court reporter is taking down the testimony this afternoon, and if anyone does anything to disrupt her ability to hear and record these proceedings, my court officers have been directed to remove that person from the courtroom. This is the one and only warning that will be given. Understood? Thank you, madam.
Judge, I have in my hand here a 4-page document, which is the post-mortem report for a 1 Mia Elizabeth Howard. This is the examination that was conducted on her body on September 23rd, 2021. It is authored by a Teresa, that is Teresa Nguyen, which is spelled Nguyen, an assistant medical examiner, at the Wayne County Medical Examiner's Office. The ME case number is 21-11206. The county of death is Wayne. The town of death is Romulus. It is in Dr. Nguyen's opinion that death was caused by multiple injuries and that the manner of death is accident.
Judge, I stipulate the admission of that
That will be
Second-
received.
Secondly, Your Honor, with respect to that postmortem report, there was a stipulation that was established at the probable cause conference with respect to the victim, the decedent in this case, that the aforementioned Mia Howard indeed being the body that was examined in this report. That was stipulated to at the probable cause conference as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Judge, secondly, we also discussed by way of stipulation what is going to be admitted as People's Exhibit number 2. This is a laboratory report that was authored by someone at the Michigan State Police by the name of Kimberly Daly, and I can read in the relevant portions, Judge, with respect to this laboratory report.
Yes, ma'am.
The laboratory report number is T as in Tom, X as in X-ray, number 21-1-15564. The incident number is a 21-15438. The subject is a Merritt, that is MERRITT, comma, Robert, common spelling. The evidence received is one container that was sealed, including 2 items, which item number 1 being 10 milliliters of approximately 9 milliliters of blood, and item 2 being the same as item 1, 10 milliliters with approximately 9 milliliters of blood. The results of the analysis on that blood, Your Honor, were that there was 0.14 grams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood, and item 2 in this report was not analyzed.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Judge, we accept that as a stipulation for today's proceeding.
Thank you. It will be received.
Thank you, Your Honor. Third, Judge, this was established at the probable cause conference with respect to stipulation for a certain video in this case. I am not publishing that at this time, but that is going to be People's Exhibit number 3. That video, Your Honor, depicts, surveillance camera that was recovered at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport that depicts Middle Belt and Goddard on September 22nd, 2022.
2021.
I'm sorry, 2021. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes, Judge, that will be accepted into the record for today's
purposes only. Those were the 3 stipulations that I have noted from our March 9th PCC. Was there anything else, ma'am?
No, Your Honor. Thank you. Nothing else preliminarily.
Any other preliminary matters from defense?
No, Your Honor.
Your first witness, ma'am.
Yes, Judge.
I'm sorry, Mr. Merritt, you may be seated.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the people calls our first witness, Mr. Joseph Salaski.
Counsel, I'm going to have you step to your right for just a second. I have the witnesses stop and spell their name right there. You don't have to go far. Good afternoon, sir. Come straight up to this podium. State your first and last name and then spell it, please.
Joseph Salatsky, Jospeph, last name Selatsky.
Mr. Salaski, raise your right hand for me, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you much. Come up here, please. Have a seat in this purple chair. My secretary is taking down what you say. For some reason, if she can't hear you, I might ask you to raise your voice or pull the microphone closer, okay? You're a witness, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And again, could you please state your name for the record?
Joseph Salaski.
Thank you. And Mr. Salaski, how are you employed?
I work for the City of Detroit Fire Department.
All right, and do you carry a rank with that?
Just
department?
firefighter.
All right, so firefighter Salaski, thank you very much, sir. Now, Mr. Salaski, I'm sorry, firefighter Salaski, how long have you been a firefighter?
9 years.
All right, now, are you familiar with the area of Goddard and Middle Belt roads?
I would say so, yes.
All right, and do those roads intersect?
Yes.
All right, does that intersection occur in the city of Romulus?
Yes.
And is that in the county of Wayne,
Yes.
in the state of Michigan?
Yes.
All right, this area, is it near Metro Airport?
Correct.
All right, now on September 22nd, 2021, a little after 8:30 PM, did you find yourself at that intersection?
I did.
Okay, now were you on foot or were you in a vehicle?
I was in a vehicle.
Okay, were you driving that vehicle?
Yes, I was.
What kind of vehicle were you driving?
It was a Ford F-150.
And as you were driving your Ford F-150, what road were you driving on?
We were on Middle Belt.
Now you said we, were you alone?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on Middle Belt. Sorry.
Okay, so you're on Middle Belt. What direction were you going?
I was going northbound.
Okay, now on this night, were you on or off duty?
I was off duty at the time.
Okay. Now, do you recall the lighting in the area? Was it light out or dark out? Was the sun up or sun down?
It was dark out. It was in the evening.
Okay, were there any street lights in the area?
Yes,
Okay, so it's dark but lit?
but well lit. Yeah, I would say so.
And do you recall anything about the weather conditions?
I would say they were very normal, not wet, dry.
Okay, any precipitation, anything that could have blocked your view as you were driving?
No, there was not.
Okay, so this was September, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not freezing out, nothing like that?
No.
Okay, now while you were driving out there, did you have any difficulty driving on the street?
No, I did not.
Okay, did you have any difficulty seeing things on or off the road?
Nope. No, I did not.
All right, do you recall what traffic was like?
I would say it was moderate. Wasn't too busy, but there were multiple cars out at the time.
Okay,
Normal evening driving
All right,
conditions.
so multiple cars traveling in your direction northbound,
Yeah, correct.
and how about in the opposite direction?
I would say so too.
Okay. Now, on September 22nd, 2021, at Goddard and Middle Belt Road, did you witness a car crash?
I did.
Okay, was your vehicle involved in the crash?
It was not.
Okay, now were you struck or injured in any way?
Not in any way, no.
Okay, do you know how many cars were involved?
I believe 3.
Okay, now you say believe. Do you know that there were 3, or do you believe?
I know there was 3.
Okay, do you recall what types of cars they were?
I believe there was one, a SUV, and then the car that struck the other car was a Dodge Avenger. And then the third car, it was like a sedan or something, a smaller vehicle.
All right, do you remember anything about the colors of the vehicles?
The Avenger was a darker color, maybe blue or black. And then I'm not sure about the other colors.
Okay. Now, before we talk about the crash itself, did you witness what occurred before the crash?
I did.
Okay, now what, if anything, did you observe?
Well, I proceeded to go northbound onto Middle Belt, turning off of Eureka, and it's a single lane. And there was the vehicle behind me, the Avenger, and he was following me very close and proceeded to kind of, I would say, veer, kind of turn as if he was kind of trying to look past me, just like I thought he was in a hurry.
Okay, so when you say you said that this Avenger was behind you, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and how close was the Avenger?
I would say within 5 feet, 10 feet, very close,
Okay.
close
and-
enough to see him really good. So
Okay, and how is it that you were able to see him?
through my rearview mirror and my side mirrors.
All right, and then you said that the vehicle was moving.
Mhm.
How can you describe the movement?
It was almost like a veer, kind of coming out of the following lane and then coming back in.
All right, now just for the record, you are moving with your right hand from the right to the left. Would that be a correct description, Mr. Don?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to see it because you're blocking my view.
Oh, I'm sorry. So can you repeat the motion that you just made?
Oh, it was to the right, but it would have had to have been to the left, obviously, because he was going over the yellow line this way.
Okay,
So it was
so
to the left and then
Alright,
coming
so-
back over right.
what direction did you see the Avenger go?
We were going northbound and then he veered to the left and would come back center in the middle lane.
Okay, and you said that when he was veering towards the yellow lane?
Yes,
That's-
almost as if what I thought was he was just trying to look, like when somebody's trying to look past you, like they're in a big hurry.
All right, and that yellow lane, that's the lane that divides the north and southbound traffic?
Correct.
All right. If you recall, how long was the Avenger behind you?
I would say, well, I turned off of Eureka to Middle Belt, and then once the lane opened up at North Line, it splits into 2 lanes. So a few minutes possibly.
Okay, and when you saw the Avenger head towards the yellow line, did it actually cross the yellow line at this point?
It did cross the yellow line, yes.
Okay. Now, did the Avenger stay behind you?
It did. It stayed behind me until, it's a single lane on Middle Belt until North Line. And then after North Line, the intersection, the 2 lanes split off. So that's when I proceeded to get over and then he went past me.
Right, and when you say the 2 lanes split off at North Line, what do you mean?
It goes from 1 lane to 2 lanes northbound. So there will be 2 lanes northbound and 2 lanes southbound
I
on
see.
each side.
All right, and so when the road opened up from the 1 lane to the 2 lane, what is it that you did?
I turned my blinker on and got over to the right-hand lane.
All right, and what did the Avenger do?
He went past me,
Okay, and you're still on Middle Belt.
still on Middle Belt.
Okay. Now, where this, okay, and then, on what side did the Avenger pass you on?
My left side.
Okay. Now, do you recall how fast your vehicle was going when the Avenger passed you?
I was going the speed limit.
What's the speed limit there, if you recall?
You know, I'm not sure.
Did the Avenger overtake your vehicle?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. And if the Avenger overtook your vehicle, it's fair to say the Avenger was going faster than your vehicle?
Correct.
Okay, and you were driving the speed limit?
Correct.
Judge objected that because he already said he does not know what the speed limit was at that time, he doesn't know what his speed was, so I don't think it's fair for him to say, my car is going over the speed limit.
Ultimately, Judge, the witnesses testified that he recalls going the speed limit. He does not recall exactly what the limit was, but his testimony is that he recalls the Avenger driving past him. So if he recalls driving at the speed limit, the Avenger passed him, he can draw whatever conclusion about the relative speed of the Avenger. He can, he's a lay witness.
Judge, again, he doesn't know his own speed, he doesn't know what the speed limit is, so he can't draw it.
Well, he can because he knows what, again, he knows.
The objection's overruled,
Thank you, Your Honor.
and he'd already answered the question. Your next question, please.
Of course. When the Avenger passed you, were you able to keep watching it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, about how far away from the Avenger were you now?
I would say 30 to 50 feet, maybe.
Okay, were any obstacles in your way?
No, there was not.
Any other vehicles or anything?
Just traffic. There were some other cars in between, just traffic.
Okay, now did that other traffic completely obscure your view of the Avenger?
No, it did not.
Okay, did the crash happen after the Avenger passed you?
Correct.
About how long after the Avenger passed you did the crash occur?
I'm not really sure the exact time, but the amount of time it would take us to get from North Line where he passed me to right before Goddard. So maybe possibly a few minutes, maybe.
Okay, and did you in fact witness the crash itself?
I did.
All right, what if anything did you observe?
Well, he was farther up ahead of me, and after he passed me, I was just minding my own business, going in my lane, and then I saw him starting to swerve. He was in the left-hand lane going northbound, and then he proceeded to cross over the yellow line to southbound traffic, and that's when I saw the accident.
All right. And you saw him strike the other vehicles that you
Yes.
talked about before?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you this, when you saw the Avenger cross the yellow line and go into southbound traffic, were there any cars around the Avenger?
I would say immediately after he crossed over the yellow line, there wasn't, but then I saw that there was oncoming traffic, and my heart sank, and I was like, oh my gosh, that car's gonna strike that other car.
Okay, did you see any pedestrians or any other obstacles around the Avenger when it swerved into the oncoming traffic?
No, I did not.
Okay. After you saw the crash, what, if anything, did you do?
I witnessed the accident. I pulled over and proceeded to go. There was a woman there who was out of her car, obviously struck. And I asked her if she called 911. I let her know my name, that I'm an off-duty fireman. And so I kind of saw she was okay. So then I proceeded to go to the Avenger.
Okay, let me stop you right there.
Yep.
Do you recall what, you said that there was an Avenger, a sedan, and a SUV before, of the 3 vehicles involved, is that correct?
Correct.
Now, this lady that was standing outside the vehicle, do you recall what vehicle she was standing by?
She was in like an SUV, I believe.
Okay, and so then after you contacted this person, you then went to the Avenger, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and what, if anything, did you do with the Avenger?
I just mainly just to make sure he was okay. Kind of like me being a fireman, I just kind of went through my kind of routine on accidents, So I checked on him. He kind of stirred and moaned and groaned in the vehicle. And then said, okay, well, now it's time, let me go check the vehicle that he hit. And that's when I found that
Okay, when you came to the Avenger, were there, how many occupants were there in the vehicle?
there were two.
Okay, and do you recall, and now this is the Avenger we're talking about.
Oh, there were two people in the car that he hit.
Okay, so that's, that what you accounted for the SUV and the Avenger, so this would have been the sedan?
Yes,
Okay, so there's two occupants in the sedan, correct?
correct.
Before we talk about the two occupants of the sedan, I want to talk about the Avenger.
Okay.
How many people were in the Avenger?
There was one
Okay, and where's that person seated?
over there. Oh, in the driver's seat.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay, now let me ask you this, you got a good look at the driver?
I did.
Okay, anything obscuring your view or this person's face?
No.
Okay, if you saw that person, would you recognize them again?
You know, that would be tough for me. I'm not sure just because of the whole gravity of the situation. I wasn't really paying attention to faces, but I possibly could.
Okay, so let me move on then. When we talk about the sedan, you had two occupants in there?
Correct.
Okay, and where were those occupants seated?
There was the older woman in the driver's seat, and then there was a younger female woman in the passenger seat.
Okay, and what, if anything, did you do with those individuals?
So I walked up to the car, tried to go to the driver's side, kind of trying to look in, but it was very smashed in, so I couldn't really see. So I tried to pry open the door, it wasn't really working. And then I was like, well, let me just try the passenger side. So then I went to the passenger side, and then that door opened up, and then I found the younger woman, and she was awake and kind of confused. And so I removed her from the car just to get away from the situation, and then that's when I found the older woman.
Okay, and when you removed her from the vehicle, did you rely on your fire department training to do so safely?
Yes,
All right. Ultimately, did emergency services come to the scene?
yes, they did.
Okay, and did you see them render aid to those involved?
I did.
Okay, and did you stay at the scene to tell the police what you saw?
Yes.
Okay, one final question. The night that you saw the crash, were you under the influence of anything that would have impaired your ability to observe or recollect anything?
No.
All right, no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your actions at that accident.
Yep.
Where were you coming from?
I was coming from home.
And I believe you said you were on North Line, no, you're on Eureka Road and
Yes.
you turned on to Middle Belt.
Yes.
All right. And you first noticed the Avenger where were you in that trip?
After I turned onto Middle Belt from Eureka, I noticed the vehicle behind me. And that's when a few moments going down Middle Belt, he was right behind me.
At that point on Middle Belt, is it one lane in each direction?
It is correct.
How long was that person behind you before it was that you moved into the other available lane and this Avenger moved around you? How long did that take, sir?
I would say a couple minutes. I mean, it's one lane from up to North Line. After Middle Belt and North Line, it divides into two lanes on each side, northbound and southbound.
So at North Line is when it divides into two lanes?
Correct.
And how much longer after North Line was it that this car went around you?
I would say almost right away. I changed after the lane was available to me. I was like, I thought I was like, this guy's in a hurry. Let me just get over. And then he proceeded to go by me.
You may have already answered this question, but I need to make sure I'm hearing it correctly. How much past North Line do you think it was when you saw the Avenger cross the line?
I would say maybe 20, 30 seconds.
And how close do you remember it being to the next road, which was Goddard?
It was fairly close, I would say. Fairly close towards Goddard.
Were you paying attention to the gutter when it was behind you?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Were you paying attention to the gutter car when it was behind you?
Yes.
Okay. After it passed you, did you have any reason to continue to pay attention to it?
No, I did not. No.
You were mindful of where you were going at that point?
Yes, I was.
Okay. At some point, you noticed that the Avenger crossed the double yellow line.
Correct.
At that point, is there a middle turn lane on the street you're on?
Yes, there was. Believe there is.
Okay. So did you notice that car when it entered the middle turn lane, or did you notice when it went further than that into the southbound lane?
It all happened rather quick. I noticed that he was veering over, and then when I kind of locked eyes, looked over, and then by then he started to crossed over to the southbound lane.
All right. Did you see how far that car crossed, the Avenger car crossed, beyond the center turn line? Did you see whether it crossed the first southbound lane, and then go into the curb lane? Or did you just see it in the center turn lane and in the first southbound lane?
Yeah, I think so. I seen it in the first southbound turn lane, and then after that, it was a big mess, so I couldn't tell you exactly where, but
All right. By the way, were you wearing a seatbelt?
yes, I was.
Okay. I know you answered this before, but I want to make sure I got it right. What did you say the weather was like that day?
It was dry. Yep.
Did you ever make eye contact with the person in the Avenger, either when he was behind you, and I know that's difficult to do, or when that person passed you?
No, I did not.
Judge, may I have one moment?
Yes.
Thank you. And I know you spoke over this before, but I want to make sure I got this right. Again, I commend you for stopping. Did you go to both the cars, or all three of the cars that were involved in this accident?
I did.
When you went, so the two cars beyond the Avenger that were involved in the accident, what kind of cars were they, if you remember?
There was the one SUV with the woman in it, and the car that got struck, I was like a sedan, like a Fusion possibly, like a sedan. A smaller car.
And you described one car as having two people in it, an older lady and a younger woman.
Yes.
Which car were they in?
The car that got struck.
The Fusion?
Yes.
And do you remember the number of people in the SUV?
I believe there was only one woman in the SUV because when I arrived at the scene, she was already outside of the car standing.
Okay. When you went to the Fusion, I apologize for this. I forgot to turn the sound off. I apologize. I apologize. Off as I can make it. I apologize.
Thank you, sir.
All right. When you went to the Fusion or the sedan, you said there were two people.
Correct.
You looked inside.
Correct.
Did you determine whether those people were wearing seatbelts?
Objection, Your Honor.
Well, Judge, it may become relevant at a later time when we talk about damage.
Objection overruled. You can answer the question, sir.
You know, I can't say I remember. I'm not sure.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you, sir.
welcome. Redirect.
Just briefly, Your Honor. Firefighter Zaleski, on cross-examination, you indicated that the weather was dry. Remember saying that?
Yes.
Now, when you say dry, were you referring to the, was it like the atmospheric weather was dry? Was there any precipitation, or were we talking about the road?
We're talking about the road as well. There was no precipitation. The ground was dry. Yep.
Okay, no further questions, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Celeste, thank you for coming in this afternoon. You may step down.
Judge, at this time, I am going to play Peoples 3, which is the video that I described during our preliminary matters. I will need your honor in order to do that, screen sharing privileges.
So you screen share versus cable?
Yes, Your
Okay.
Honor, because, yes.
That's fine.
And Judge, I would like a warning for the gallery and whoever might be watching online that this video depicts what we believe to be the crash, and that if anybody needs to step out at this time, that this is the time for them to do it or to stop watching.
For those who are not able to hear, this courtroom is about to review a video that some might find disturbing. This might be a good time to either black your screen, or if you need to step out of the courtroom, please do so now. You okay?
Thank you.
Judge, also for the record, I'm not playing this video in its entirety. I believe we're only going to be watching a couple minutes.
How long is the entire video?
It is 8 minutes and 13 seconds long.
And we're watching approximately how long of it?
I would say 2 minutes, Judge. I don't remember.
That's okay.
exactly.
I'm not gonna hold you to 2 minutes. I just wanna.
Your Honor, I'm publishing now.
Thank you.
Judge, I'm pausing this at 24 seconds only because that, and I don't know, Your Honor, if it's obstructing your view as well, that icon in the top right corner is obstructing the video. So that either needs to be moved by way of using a cursor, but that is going to inhibit Your Honor's ability to view this.
I can see it. I'm looking
Okay.
at a slightly different screen,
Okay,
so I don't.
I don't know if Mr. O'Donnell is able, to, has an objection in terms of that icon being there so that he can see it.
Well, Judge, I've seen this video, so I
Okay.
know the prosecutor is right, that whatever that is in the screen is blocking the very point where the collision occurs. But I've seen it enough, so I know what happens, and I've shown it to my client, so you're free to keep playing.
All right, Judge, I'm going to restart it with that. I just wanted to make sure that you were able to. see
That's
it.
just because of our
I know,
Polycom system and us being on Zoom, but I can see it. I have a completely unobstructed view right here. Okay.
Your Honor, may I restart it? Or are
Yes,
you okay?
please.
Okay. Indicating for the record, Judge, that I just paused this at about 37 seconds in. If you would like, Your Honor, I could replay that, but that is the only portion of this 8 minute and 13-second video that I need to publish in this court at this time.
Judge, I've seen the video, and the prosecutor is speaking correctly. Now, I don't know how, I mean, I haven't watched 8 minutes of it, but I can tell you that the only part that features the crash is in the first 20 to 30 seconds.
Thank you, sir. And I've seen it now twice.
So then with that, we will call our next witness,
Thank you.
which is Stephanie Rea
Would you stop your screen share unless she needs it?
I will do that right now, Your Honor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ma'am. Can I have you come right up to this podium? State your first and last name for me, please,
My name is Stephanie Ray.
and then spell it.
The first name.
First and last, please.
Stepanie. Last name Rea, Rea.
R-E-A.
A.
Raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you much. Can I have you come up here, have a seat in this purple chair? My secretary will be recording everything you say. For some reason, she can't hear you. I might ask you either raise your voice or pull the microphone closer, okay? Your witness, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, please state and spell your name for this record.
My name is Stephanie Rea. It's Stepanie. Last name Rea, Rea.
And Ms. Ray, if at any point in time during this testimony you need a break, please let us know. I want to bring your attention to September 22nd, 2021. Did anything happen on that day that brings you to court?
I was involved in a car incident.
Do you recall, I'm sorry, can you restate the last part? You were involved in a car what?
Incident?
Okay, do you recall where you were when this happened?
I was driving southbound on Middle Belt right next to the airport.
Is this in the city of Romulus?
Yes.
County of Wayne?
Yes.
Do you remember about what time of day this was?
I was on my way to work, so it must have been about 8:30.
In the evening?
Yes.
And what kind of car were you driving in?
2017 white Escape, Ford Escape.
Do you recall, as you were driving, you said which direction were you driving down?
South.
You were driving south?
Yes. Right.
One moment, Judge. You said you were driving southbound on Middle Belt?
The airport was to my right.
The airport was to your right. Okay. Do you remember how many lanes of traffic you were also going southbound at the point that you were driving that you remember?
There's the 2 lanes.
2 lanes going the same direction that you're going, south.
Yes.
Do you remember anything about the number of lanes on total on the road while you were driving south?
There's 5 total counting the middle lane.
Okay, so there was a separate middle lane
Yes,
and 2 other lanes.
correct,
Were those going the opposite direction?
correct.
Which would be going north on
Yes.
Middle Belt?
Yes.
So I want to walk you through what you remember when you say this car incident that you were involved in. What happened?
Okay. Was on my way to work. I'm sorry. I was on my way to work. The roads were wet, but we were going at a good pace. I remember because there was a bit of traffic coming up before that. So then we were finally at a good pace.
Sorry, Ms. Ray, I'm going to interrupt you for just a sec. I need you to raise your voice for me, please.
Was driving to work. And it wasn't raining, but the roads were wet. And I know that there was a distance between me and the car in front of me because I'm a State Farm Drive Safe member, so sorry, I don't want to go.
You don't
Um,
have to, I mean, I want you to, get to this incident that you said
Right.
that brings you to court today. So there was, how much of a distance between the car in front of you and you?
A car to 2 cars in front of me.
Okay, and what happens?
So we're driving to work, then I see headlights starting to come over facing me, coming over from my left to be directly in front of me. Out of instinct, I saw the car in front of me go to the left and I followed suit because there
stop you
were
there.
cars driving to the right.
This car in front of you that goes to the left, is this, you just described earlier the 5 lanes of travel
Yeah.
that were in your surrounding area as you're going down south on Middle Belt. This car that goes left, where does that car end up that you see?
The middle turn lane,
The turn lane?
Yeah.
Okay, and you said out of instinct you do what?
followed behind to go to the left out of the way of the oncoming car.
And so you go over to the center lane?
Yes.
Okay, what happens after you do that?
I just remember getting hit after that. My car called 911. I went to get my phone because 911 was calling and I noticed the smoke coming from my steering wheel. So I just got out of the car and, excuse me, walked to the back of my car, further away from my car after 911. And yeah, I finished talking to 911 and let them know that what roads we were at and that there had been more than one car hit.
I want to back up a little bit, Ms. Rhea. When we describe the lanes of traffic that you were in, you said, so to your right was another lane of traffic that was also traveling south. And you said that you veered to the left.
Right. Yes, I veered to the left.
Okay, and is there a reason why you didn't go over to the right lane?
There were cars in the right lane.
So there was active traffic
Yeah.
to your right.
Yeah.
So you go over to the left center lane.
Correct.
Do you remember anything about, you said you saw headlights coming from this approaching car. Do you remember anything about that car before you saw the headlights? About its,
It just happened so quick that the headlights came in front.
and so was this car that you saw the headlights that were facing you, was this car pointing towards your car at this point when you see
Yes.
the headlights?
Yes.
Do you remember anything about how big the car was?
I don't remember until after I was getting out of my car that I saw it was a sedan on my car.
Okay, let's talk about that. What do you mean there was a sedan on your
A
car?
smaller vehicle. I don't know the exact kind of car it was.
What I mean is, what do you mean by on your car?
It was the car that hit my car.
You saw this
I
after it
saw
had,
that a car hit my car. At the time, I didn't know who hit me.
absolutely. So afterwards, you see this car that hit you after contact.
Right.
Do you remember what color it was?
No.
Do you remember if it was an SUV or a sedan?
Sedan.
Do you remember seeing anybody seated in the car?
Yes.
Do you remember if there was anyone else in the car?
No.
Can you describe to me this person that was seated in the car, if they were male or female?
Male.
Can you describe to me if this person appeared to you to be over or under the age of 30?
I'd say over.
You just remember what race this person was?
African American.
Okay, so at some point in time after you're hit by this car, do you get out of your car?
Yes.
Do you see what happens to the African American male who was seated in the car that hit you?
Just that the paramedics were trying to get him out of his car.
You saw that?
Yes.
Just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Rhea, going back to when you saw the headlights approaching you, do you remember from what direction they were approaching you?
They came from my left.
Your Honor, I don't have any more questions for her right now.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell?
Good afternoon, Ms.
Good
Reed.
afternoon,
Thank you for the effort you're making.
for sure.
All right, so were you stopped at the intersection of Middle Belt and Goddard? Do you remember that your car came to a stop at that intersection?
I don't remember if I was coming off the light or not. I don't remember if I was coming off a stopped light or if we were ongoing.
But do you remember, did you come to a stop at that intersection and then proceed after the light change?
I don't remember.
Okay. I believe that you said, but correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a car in front of you
Correct,
and you were in the left lane, correct?
correct,
And there was another lane on your right.
correct.
Okay. How far did, if you know, or if you can remember, how far did you travel when you noticed there were now lights in front of you?
I don't remember.
Do you remember what the car in front of you did in relationship to that car that came over and was headed your way?
The car in front of me went to the left.
Went to the left?
Yes.
By going to the left, does that mean that that person went into the center turn lane?
Correct.
And from your opinion, was that person going to the center turn lane in order to avoid an accident with the car that was now coming toward you and that car?
Correct.
Okay. And did you also move into the center turn lane?
Correct. Yes.
Did you move all the way into the center turn lane or just a portion of your car? If you can remember.
I can't say exactly.
Okay. And I'm just jumping for a moment away from that subject. You said the roads were wet.
Correct.
How long had you been driving when this accident occurred, if you remember?
Like my commute to work
Yeah,
or yours?
in terms of time.
Probably in the car 15 minutes at that point.
Okay. While you were driving, had it been raining while you were driving?
My opinion is that the roads were wet and it was kicking up water.
Right, but I'm just asking you if you remember rain
No,
occurring.
I don't remember
Okay.
rain occurring.
All right. So just so I understand, the car that was northbound, coming towards you, that moved into the center lane, then did it move into the lane that you had been in?
Yes,
Okay. Did it move any further than that? Did it continue to move, if you saw, into would have been the lane to your right?
I didn't see.
You didn't see, okay. And in terms of a collision, what collision did you then see? Before something hit you, did you see any collision?
I don't remember.
So the first thing you were aware of is that your car got hit.
Yes,
And do you know which car hit your car?
no,
But was it the car that was coming directly at you, or was it some other car?
I know. I'm not sure how to respond because I know I know who hit me.
Okay, which car hit you, or who? It's hard to say who, because that implies a person, but
Right.
which car hit you?
The car that was driving at us, at me. Not the car that I was following.
Do you remember your speed while you were traveling?
I don't remember.
All right, Judge, again, one more.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Just one question, Judge. Ms. Rhea, earlier you testified that you saw paramedics pull someone out of the car. That person that you saw pull out of the car was in the car that you know hit you.
Correct.
Great. Nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. Ms. Rhea, thank you for your testimony. You may step down.
Judge, our next witness is a Detective Brian Perkins.
Detective Perkins, please come up to the podium. State and then spell your first and last names.
It's Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, and Perkins, P-E-R-K-I-N-S.
Do you swear or affirm testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Come up here and have a seat in this purple chair, please. Mary Ann is taking down your testimony. If for some reason she's unable to hear you, I'll ask you to raise your voice or pull the microphone closer, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Your witness, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, please state and spell your name for the record.
Detective, and then Brian, B-R-Y-A-N. Last name is Perkins, P-E-R-K-I-N-S.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a police officer with the city of Romulus,
How long have you been a police officer with the city of Romulus?
just under 10 years.
Was that 20 years?
10.
10 years? Detective Perkins, I want to bring your attention to September 22nd, 2021. Do you recall if you were asked to respond to a scene at Middle Belt and Goddard in the city of Romulus?
Yes.
What was the nature of the run?
Multi-vehicle accident.
Did you make the location?
I did.
What happens when you get there?
When I arrived on scene, I observed 3 vehicles on Middle Belt Road that were disabled.
3 vehicles?
3 vehicles.
Do you remember what these vehicles looked like?
There was a black Dodge Avenger, and parallel to that was a white Escape. And then just off the roadway on the west side of Middle Belt in the grass was a blue Ford Focus.
And do you remember anything about the condition of these 3 vehicles?
I would say major damage, front end damage.
If I showed you pictures of the vehicles on the day in question, do you think you'd be able to recognize them?
Yes, I would.
Judge, for the record, I'm showing defense counsel what's been pre-marked as people's 4 and 5. Judge, may I approach the witness with people's 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I just handed you a photo. Do you recognize what's on that photo?
It's the blue Ford Focus.
And does this photo fairly and accurately depict the blue Ford Focus as you saw it when you responded to the scene on September 22nd, 2021?
Yes, it does.
Does this photo appear to be altered in any way?
No, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, I'm moving to admit people's 4.
No objection, Judge.
It's admitted.
And Judge, may I retrieve it from him and publish it to you?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Detective, you also testified that you saw a black Dodge Avenger located parallel to a white Ford Escape. I am going to hand you a photo and let me know if you recognize what's depicted in the photo. Judge, may I approach him?
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, do you recognize what's depicted in the photo?
I do.
What's depicted in the photo?
That would be the black Dodge Avenger parallel to the white Ford Escape.
These are the 2 vehicles that you saw with your own eyes when you responded to the scene.
Yes, they were.
Does this photo fairly and accurately depict those 2 vehicles as you saw them when you responded to the scene?
Yes.
Does this photo appear altered in any way?
No, ma'am.
Judge, at this time, I'm moving to admit people's 5.
Judge, again, no objection.
Thank you, sir. It's admitted.
Judge, may I approach to retrieve it and publish to you?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
After making these observations with respect to these three vehicles, what do you do?
At that point, it would be to identify any type of possible victims or to render aid.
And did you identify any possible victims?
I encountered a vehicle, not to be involved, but it did have a passenger of the vehicle of the Blue Focus.
Okay, and did you make contact with the passenger of the Ford Focus?
Yes,
Okay. Did you ever have occasion to see who might have been seated in the blue Ford Focus?
I did.
Okay, and what did you see when you approached the driver's side?
So I approached from the passenger side at first, and I observed a white female slumped over on her right side, and her hair was covering her face.
Was she responsive?
No,
Were you able to make an assertion as to whether or not at this time she had any signs of life?
no signs of life.
Do you recall, Detective Perkins, from your responding to the scene, what the road conditions were?
I know it was a dark unlighted road at the time of the accident.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but please keep your voice really loud. Bring
Oh,
the
I'm
mic.
sorry. Yeah, it was a dark unlighted road. As far as the road condition, I don't want to speculate. I don't remember if it had rained at that point.
Just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I have nothing further at this time.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell?
Good afternoon.
Do you know how long after the accident you made the scene?
I would say within 10 minutes.
Were you the first officer at the scene?
To my recollection, I believe there was a few officers that had arrived roughly at the same time as we were both all pulling out.
Did I hear you correctly to say that you don't recall the road conditions at that time? Was it dry? Was it wet?
That is correct. I don't want to speculate.
As far as you know, were you the first person to approach the three cars involved?
I don't believe I was the first person to approach. I believe that there was officers in different parts that were assessing the scene. I would say that it would be fair to say that I approached the passenger of the vehicle first and made contact with her, as well as there was another person with her.
There's been evidence, testimony that there were three vehicles involved.
Correct.
Did you approach all three vehicles?
At a certain point in time during the night, yes.
As far as you can remember, let's see, we've had testimony that there was an escape, a white escape. Do you recall if the passenger or passengers of that car had gotten out of the vehicle?
That I don't recall.
All right, that's fair. There's been testimony that there was a blue Ford Focus. Do you remember if the passengers or passenger had gotten out of that vehicle?
The passenger was already out of the vehicle upon my arrival. The driver was not.
Okay. Did you make any attempt to remove the driver from the vehicle?
No,
Do you recall if the driver was wearing a seatbelt?
I don't recall.
Judge, just for the record, I know you already answered it, but I'm objecting to this question about the seatbelt. And any further questions that he asks his witnesses about the seatbelt, it's not relevant.
Well, at some point in time, it may be, Judge, or I'll explain why it is, but I'll stop there.
Thank you.
So you did see that the passenger had come out of the Ford Focus,
I didn't watch her come out of the
but
Ford
you
Focus.
observed, okay, you identified a person who said that she was a passenger from the Ford Focus.
Yes, sir.
And then the driver was in the vehicle.
Correct.
And then, did you have any contact with the Avenger?
I did not.
If you can explain where, and there's been testimony at this point that at the place where the vehicles were, there's 5 lanes. 2 lanes going north, 2 lanes going south, and a middle turn lane. Is that a correct statement?
Yep, yeah.
And middle
that is.
belt, I
Yep.
think, just north of, or just south of, got it.
Just south of Goddard.
Okay. So my question to you is if you can give a visual layout of where each one of those cars was when you made the scene.
You want me to describe it for you?
Yes,
Okay.
in relationship to those 5 lanes. If you can do it simply, if you can't, I'll understand.
Okay. As far as it would be difficult for me to recall exactly what the lane would be. I do remember that there was both of the vehicles, in reference to the black Dodge Avenger and the white Ford Escape were parallel facing southeast, and that the blue Ford Focus was off of the roadway, and that would be facing northwest. I hope that answers your question.
And first of all, I can begin by asking, were all the vehicles in the northbound lanes?
I'd have to see a picture to refresh my memory.
All right. All right. All right. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect, ma'am?
Just a moment, Your Honor. Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Detective Perkins, thank you for coming in this afternoon. You may step down.
Thank you, Judge Martin.
Good to see you.
Your Honor, may I approach to retrieve those exhibits from you?
Yes, ma'am. Or,
Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell, do you have any objection to Detective Perkins remaining in the courtroom?
To which, I'm sorry, which person?
Detective Perkins, do you have any objection to him remaining in the courtroom? Thank you.
All right, Judge, at this time, our next witness is Lieutenant Michael Fife.
Up to the podium for me, please, sir. State your first and last name and then spell it.
Michael Fife, Michaelfyfe.
Do you swear or affirm testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Come up here and have a seat in this purple chair, please. Mary Ann will be taking down your testimony. If for some reason she's unable to hear you, I'll ask you to raise your voice or pull the microphone closer, okay? Your witness, ma'am.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, please state and spell your name for the record.
Michael Fife, Michaelfyfe.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a lieutenant with the Romulus Fire Department,
How long have you been employed by the Romulus Fire Department?
22 years.
Lieutenant Fife, I want to bring your attention back to September 22nd, 2021. Do you recall if your duties brought you to the location of Middle Belt and Goddard in the city of Romulus?
I do.
Do you recall making that location?
Yes.
What happens when you arrive?
We had a motor vehicle accident I was directed towards the Dodge Avenger vehicle that was, still had a patient in trap. And we took over extrication for that and transported that patient.
So you, your primary focus was a black Dodge Avenger.
Yes,
Do you remember the condition of the black Dodge Avenger when you arrived on scene?
yes.
Can you describe it for the judge?
Had heavy front end and side damage to the vehicle.
Do you recall how many occupants were in that car?
One.
Do you recognize any of the individuals in court here today as being the occupant of that car?
Yes,
Could you please indicate for the record where this individual is seated?
directly behind you in the Monroe, or the maroon suit.
In the maroon suit? Judge, may the record reflect the identification of the defendant, Robert Merritt?
It does.
He indicated that the defendant was the only occupant of the black Dodge Avenger.
Correct.
Can you tell me about, once you approach the car, where is he seated again?
In the driver's seat.
And what happens when you approach him in the driver's seat?
We were advising him, he was reaching around a lot, trying to grab, he was trapped in the vehicle. One of his feet were behind like the gas or brake pedal, one of them, I don't recall what pedal exactly. As we were attempting to extricate him, he continuously tried to reach for the door. He didn't want his door cut off.
Why do you say he didn't want his door cut off?
He was highly agitated, confused, had a strong odor of intoxicant coming from him.
Okay.
We eventually, his phone was ringing multiple times. We got him to hold his phone. I believe it was his wife that he was speaking with.
Lieutenant, did you take any photos of the defendant when you arrived at the scene?
I did.
Judge, for the record, I'm showing defense counsel what I have pre-marked as People's Exhibit 6. Your Honor, may I approach Lieutenant Fife?
Yes, ma'am.
Lieutenant, I just handed you a photo. Do you recognize this photo?
I do.
How is it that you recognize this photo?
I took this photo.
And does this photo that I approach you with, does it appear altered in any way from the photo that you yourself took?
It does not.
Judge, at this time, I'm moving to admit People 6.
No objection.
It's admitted.
And Judge, I'm going to publish this to you by way of Zoom. And Judge, if you are satisfied, I can stop the share.
I am, thank you.
May I approach to retrieve it?
Yes, ma'am.
And Judge, I will hand you a hard copy if you would like.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Lieutenant, were you able to successfully extricate the defendant from the Dodge Avenger?
We were.
You remember if he said anything to you during this whole process?
He just kept repeatedly stating that he didn't take drugs.
He did not.
He did not.
He
use
did not
drugs.
what?
He did not use drugs.
Thank you. I didn't catch the last part. I'm sorry.
Judge, may I approach to retrieve that from you? And with that, I believe I'm set.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell.
Also, fine. Good afternoon. Are you the person who did most of the work to get Mr. Merritt out of the car?
I am not. I am the officer on scene that overwatched 2 firefighters extricate Mr. Merritt from the vehicle.
He was talking
He was.
and his phone was ringing?
Different.
And how did you conclude that it was his wife?
When he answered, he said it was his wife on the phone. She had called multiple times.
Okay. All right. I'm jumping ahead a little bit now, but were you there when his wife appeared on the scene?
She was not on scene when we transported him.
As you extricated him, were you able to know whether or not he was wearing a seatbelt?
Yes,
And was he?
yes.
Um, The road has been described as 5 lanes, 2 going north, 2 going south, a turn lane in the middle. Can you describe where this Dodge Avenger was in relationship to those 5 lanes of traffic?
If I could recall, he was partially in what would be the turn lane and the southbound lanes of Middlewell Road. Fast lane of the southbound lanes.
The inside lane or the lane closest to
Closest to the end, to the center.
to the center? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Lieutenant, I want to bring your attention back to the exhibit that we admitted. Do you see where my cursor is pointed on the screen that depicts the exhibit?
Yes.
In the courtroom?
Yes.
Where is my cursor pointing?
The airbag.
Okay, so the airbag had deployed, and that's what you observed when you arrived?
Correct.
Judge, nothing further.
Thank you. Lieutenant Fife, thank you for your testimony. You may step down. Have a good afternoon, sir. Yes.
Thank you. Vehicle Sergeant Aaron Vinars.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
State your first and last name and then spell it for me, please.
Aaron Bernards, AARON, BINIARZ.
Just raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you much. Come up here, please. Have a seat in this purple chair. Mary Ann is taking down your testimony this afternoon. For some reason, she's unable to hear you. I'll ask you to raise your voice or pull the microphone closer, okay? Your witness, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
All right, now, you're currently in uniform, is that correct?
That's correct.
What uniform is that?
Trenton Police Department uniform.
All right, so fair to say that you are employed by the Trenton Police Department.
I am,
All right, how long have you been with the Trenton Police Department?
since 2012.
All right, and what is your current rank?
Sergeant,
All right, thank you, Sergeant. And what's your current duty assignment?
Sergeant, Road Patrol.
Okay, and are you or were you involved in the investigation of a vehicle crash that occurred on September 22nd, 2021 at Middle Belt and Goddard Roads in the city of Romulus?
Yes, I was.
All right, and how is it that a Trenton Police Sergeant was involved in investigating a crash in Romulus?
I'm in charge of what's called the Downriver Crash Reconstruction Team. We assist downriver agencies with serious injury or fatal crashes.
All right, and specifically, how were you involved in the investigation of this crash at Middle Belt and Goddard?
I was contacted by Corporal Haynes from the Rhinebeck Police Department to image airbag control modules that are in the vehicles that were involved in the crash.
All right, what is an airbag control module?
Basically, it's a module inside the vehicle that is ran by several computer processors that tell the airbags when to fire.
All right, and why is it that you were to image them?
To find out what was going on prior to the crash.
Okay, does the airbag control module, is there a way to abbreviate airbag control module?
ACM.
ACM, all right. So when I refer to something as ACM, that's what I mean. Do you understand?
Correct.
Thank you, Sergeant. So the ACM, you said that you're looking for information about what happened at the crash.
Prior to the crash.
In the
yes.
ACM, correct?
Correct.
How does the ACM tell us that?
There's, hardware inside, circuit boards that store several seconds of data from each vehicle that's going down the road.
Okay, and what kind of data is recorded in the ACM?
There's all kinds, speed of the vehicle, RPMs of the vehicle, whether or not the brakes were applied, engine throttle speed, accelerated pedal. I mean, there's different modules, older modules, newer modules. Newer modules give you everything. And if the steering wheel is turned, if someone's buckled, unbuckled, they're they capture a lot of data.
I see. Now, when you say you image the ACM, well, actually, before we get there, this data that the ACM collects, why does it collect this data?
Basically, it's for the manufacturers. We just happen to benefit as law enforcement, but it's more for product liability for Ford, GM, and so on.
Okay, and forgive me if I asked you this already, but the airbag control module, that literally controls the airbag and whether it deploys?
Correct.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Now, when you said that you imaged the ACM, what does that mean?
Basically, I'm hooking up a cable to the module and reading the data that's stored on that module.
Okay, now, are you manipulating any of that data?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and this was a question I wanted to ask before. When the vehicle records, or when the ACM records that data, does the driver have to do anything to put that information in the ACM?
No.
Okay, so then how is it recorded?
I guess can you rephrase that?
Sure. So you say that there's that there's data that you use to find out what happened immediately before some event in the ACM. How does that information get into the ACM?
It's being input what the driver is doing. It's what the car is doing, I should say. Also, some of what the driver is doing by accelerator pedal being pushed down, brakes being applied, but it's being captured by what the vehicle is doing.
I see. And does the ACM record that automatically?
Yes.
Okay. So the driver doesn't have to flip a switch or anything to turn the
Correct.
ACM on. Okay. Now, again, when you obtain this data from the ACM, you're not manipulating it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, are ACMs generally reliable?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When you do this imaging, do you need to have special training to do it?
Yes.
Okay. Have you received that training?
I have.
Okay. And when did you receive the training?
Back in October of 2013.
Okay. And who conducted it, if you recall?
Rick Ruth and Tim Brown.
Okay. Now, were they part of a greater organization or?
Rick Ruth worked on the modules for Ford. He's one of the designers of the ACM.
Okay. And who put on this training?
IPTM, which is the Institute of Police Technology Management out of Florida.
Okay, so this was a training class?
Yes.
Okay. And what did the training consist of?
Basically how to hook up and image vehicles. There are basically two different ways. One is what's called the diagnostic link connector, which is basically underneath the dash. That's basically what your mechanic hooks up to. They plug it in and we image the data that way, or we physically hook a cable to the ACM and image it that way.
Okay, now, so this training taught you how to recover the event data from the ACM.
Yes, recover it and then interpret it.
Okay, and then did you successfully complete this training?
I did.
Okay, and were you certified as anything as it was at the conclusion of the training?
It's just CDR technician.
I see. At the conclusion of the training, was there a proficiency test?
Yes,
Okay, did you pass the proficiency
I
test?
did.
Okay. Now, how many times have you downloaded and interpreted ACMs from vehicles?
Anywhere between 90 and 100 times.
All right. Have you testified about downloading and interpreting the data modules in court before?
Yes,
Okay. About how many times, if you recall?
in court twice.
Twice. Okay. Do you remember when and where?
33rd District Court.
Judge, at this point, I'm going to stipulate this person an expert data retrieval from modules that are contained in cars.
Is that where we were going?
I can, Your Honor. So yes.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Okay, so focusing now on your work in this case. How many ACMs did you image?
3.
All right. And from what type of vehicles, if you recall?
A Dodge Avenger, a Ford Focus, and a Ford Escape.
Now, when you image the ACM and when you image the ACMs in these vehicles, were you able to recover any data?
Yes,
Okay, and how is that data memorialized?
it is stored on what's called a CDR file, crash data recovery, crash data retrieval file. That's special software to read it, and it's basically raw data that can't be manipulated.
Okay, and this crash data retrieval file, was that memorialized in a digital way?
Yes,
Okay, and then ultimately, did you create a hard copy from that?
I did.
All right. And Your Honor, I am showing people's proposed exhibit number 7 to Mr. O'Donnell. All right, may I approach the witness?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, sir, I'm approaching you with what has been marked as people's proposed exhibit number 7. Do you recognize people's proposed 7?
I do.
How is it that you recognize that?
That is the CDR software printout of an image of a 2009 Dodge Avenger.
Okay, please take a look at the document. There are multiple pages there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. About 26 pages?
Yes, sir.
All right, would you go ahead and take a look at that and ultimately tell me if you recognize, if you can see any material changes, alterations, deletions from last you saw that document?
No, it
Okay.
looks,
So that fairly and accurately depict the data that you were able to recover from the Dodge Avenger?
yes.
People move for the admission of people 7?
No objection.
Will be received.
Thank you. Now, Sergeant, I ask you to hang on to people 7 just for a moment. Now, let me ask you this. When you recovered the information for this Dodge Avenger, did you do so pursuant to a search warrant?
I did.
Okay, and the vehicles, and actually, and did you do that for all 3 of the vehicles?
Yes,
Okay, so all of them were recovered pursuant to search warrant?
yes,
All right, and were the vehicles at a secure location when you
Yes.
recovered it?
yes.
And what location was that?
I believe JT Crova towing.
Okay. Focusing for the moment on the Dodge Avenger, what was the vehicle's condition when you saw it?
Heavily damaged.
Okay, and that damage, did that affect your ability to image the ACM?
The easier way, yes.
Okay, now when you said the easier way, so when the process, the 2 ways that you talked about recovering the ACM before, there's an easier way and a more difficult way?
Correct.
Okay, so the easier way was precluded.
It was to do the damage of the vehicle.
Okay, and what way was that?
Hooking up to the diagnostic link connector due to the battery and no power and you have to go to the module then.
All right, so then what did you in fact do in this case?
And remove the actual airbag module and did what's called a benchtop download.
Okay, now did that affect any of the data that was contained in the ACM?
No.
Okay. Now, I think that I asked before that, well, let me ask you this. Once you downloaded the data from the ACM and you did review the data, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you know if the damage that the Avenger sustained affected the information recorded by the ACM?
No.
Okay, how do you know that?
Looking at one of the graphs on one of the pages, you can see that it's completed.
Okay, do you recall what graph and what page?
I could look in here and determine.
Sure.
So on page 7 of 26.
Okay, and what specifically about that graph is noteworthy?
The graph basically times out or completes. There's no falling off or basically losing power to the airbag control module.
Okay, so you didn't see any indication so did you see any indication that the Avenger's ACM was not working?
No.
Okay. Now, regarding Peoples 7, the report as a whole, did you add anything to this report?
Well, yes, doing prior to the image, the software makes you put certain parameters in before it will image the module.
Okay, what information did you input?
I input the VIN number, the user, who was myself, our case number, and the crash date.
All right. Just for a moment, do you have a copy of People 7 with you?
I do.
All right. Your Honor, may I approach and recover People 7?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'm just going to ask you to see your copy of People 7. I recover both People 7 and this copy. I'm going to show both to Mr. Brown. And Your Honor, may I approach the court and publish People 7?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give the court People 7 and return the copy of People 7 to Sergeant Miners. So the information that you were talking about, the VIN, the user information, case number, what page is that on?
Page 1.
All right. And did you add anything else to any other portion of this report?
Underneath the comment section, yes.
Okay, and what was that?
Basically the vehicle, the VIN, the license plate, the location where the image was completed, the agency that's requesting the image, who was present with me when I did the image, the vehicle tire size, the recommended vehicle tire size, what kind of image it was, and under what authority.
Okay, and did you make any other changes to anything else in this report?
No.
Okay. Added nothing, detracted nothing?
Correct.
Okay. Are you able to add or detract anything from the balance of the report?
No.
Do you know why you're not able to do that?
For court purposes like this.
Okay. Does the software that you use allow you to make those changes?
No.
All right, regarding Peoples 7, how many events did the Avengers ACM record?
2.
Okay. Now, which of those was relevant to your review?
The most recent event.
Okay. Now, how is it now the 2 events? How are those? How do those appear chronologically speaking?
So the first prior event, and then the most recent event is the most recent event.
Okay. And so the first prior event happened sometime
Before the most recent.
Understand. Thank you. And you said that you focused in on the most recent event. Is that correct?
Correct.
Why is that?
Because that's what happened in this crash.
Okay. How do you know that?
Because airbag modules, especially the older ones, once the airbags fire, There's basically inert, they can't be used again. You'd have to replace the whole module along with the airbags to have a car that's drivable.
I see. And you said that you saw the Avenger and the damage that it sustained, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall if the airbag had deployed?
It did.
Okay, and would this have been the driver's airbag?
Yes.
All right. Now, how long does the ACM record data?
This particular module is 5 seconds.
Okay. And did the airbag control module, the ACM, record something called pre-crash data?
Yes.
What is pre-crash data?
Basically, what the vehicle is doing for 5 seconds prior to the crash.
And is this the data that will include a vehicle's reported speed, information about the accelerator pedal, et cetera?
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you recall at what page that information appears?
Basically starts on page 7.
Okay. Now, page 7. What's depicted on page 7?
It's called the longitudinal crash pulse. Basically, longitudinal means the vehicle going forward or backward. Lateral would be left or right. But this vehicle, or I'm sorry, this module only recorded longitudinal crash pulse.
Okay. And the information, and can you describe the meaning of the graph that's depicted on page 7?
Sure. So obviously, when a crash happens, something happens to the vehicle, either moving forward, moving backwards, moving left, moving right. But again, this only recorded longitudinal, so forward or backward. And this is something we call delta V in the crash reconstruction world, which means change in velocity. So this vehicle recorded a substantial change in velocity.
And when you say substantial, can you quantify that?
It's somewhere 40 to 50 miles an hour.
And that's what's depicted on the graph, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you indicate that this change in velocity between 40 and 50 miles an hour does that indicate what speed the vehicle is going before the crash, at the crash, or what?
Not at this graph. This graph just speed change that vehicle or that module experienced.
Okay. The next most recent, or I'm sure regarding the most recent event, what page is the next most relevant portion of the data that you were looking at?
It would be page 10.
All right. And what's depicted on page 10?
Is speed, vehicle that indicated, accelerator pedal %, and engine throttle, and service brake.
Okay. And is this information also recorded on a table?
Yes.
Okay. What page is that on?
Should be the next page. Page 11.
Okay, let's focus on that. At 5 seconds, what was the vehicle's reported speed?
68 miles an hour.
Now, is that the actual, is that the vehicle's actual speed, or what exactly does that mean?
Well, there's different parts. I'm not sure exactly of a 2009 Dodge Avenger. Some have wheel speed sensors, and that's probably what this is reading, is what the wheels are traveling at.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Is there a margin of error in the record of this speed?
Yes.
Okay, and what is it?
4%.
Okay, now why is there this margin of error?
Speedometers, there's things that can be changed. Transmissions can be changed. So there's a standard of 4% plus or minus.
Okay, so that could be that'd be plus or minus 4% from the 68.
Correct.
Okay, and that would be what, say anywhere between
70 and
65,
something, yeah.
I think, if I'm doing my math right? Ultimately,
About 3 miles an hour roughly.
right, at 5 seconds, do you know the accelerator pedal position?
42.9%.
All right, and now what does that mean?
That's the pedal is being pushed down 42.9%.
Okay, so that's just literally the, how much of 100, or how much pressure is put on the pedal? or
Correct.
How far it's been depressed?
Correct.
Okay. At 5 seconds, do you know whether the brake was applied?
It was not.
Okay. Is that the column that's marked service brake?
Correct.
And it says off, correct?
Correct.
So when it says off, that means the brake is not on?
Correct.
All right. At 4 seconds, what's the vehicle's reported speed?
68 miles an hour.
All right, and that's still subject to the plus or minus 4% margin of error?
Correct.
All right. What was the accelerator's position?
46.9%.
Okay. Was the brake applied?
No.
At 3 seconds, what was the vehicle's reported speed?
68 miles an hour.
The accelerator pedal's position?
46.9.
And was the brake applied at 3 seconds?
No.
At 2 seconds, what was the reported vehicle speed?
69 miles an hour.
And was the accelerator's position, what was the reported accelerator pedal's position?
51.5%.
And was the brake applied?
No.
At 1 second, what was the vehicle speed?
68 miles an hour.
What was the accelerator pedal's position?
0.
And at this point, was the brake applied?
No.
At 0.1 seconds, what was the vehicle's reported speed?
67 miles per hour.
What was the accelerator pedal's position?
0.
And was the brake applied?
No.
For all 5 seconds in this of the data, was the brake ever applied?
No.
Is there any recording after the 0.1 second mark?
No.
Now, you also indicated that you had imaged the ACM for another one of the vehicles, the Ford Focus. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you imaged the Ford Focus ACM, how did you image that?
The same way. Remove the module and hook the cable up to it.
Okay, and were you able to find any data?
Yes.
All right. And did you memorialize that data in the same way as the Dodge Avenger?
Yes, the same manner as this.
All right. Just for the record, I'm showing people's ACs on. And first quick shot?
Yes, please.
I'm handing you a list of Marcus Peoples' proposed 8. Do you recognize that?
I do.
How is it that you recognize People's proposed 8?
It is the CDR software from the 2017 Ford Escape.
Please take a look. And how many pages are there?
21 pages.
All right. And would you please take a look to make sure that it substantially comports with your memory of the document when last you saw it?
Yes.
You notice any material changes, alterations, deletions, anything like that?
No.
People move for the admission of People's 8?
Again, Judge, no objection.
Thank you, sir. It'll be received.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
You have a copy of People's 8 with you?
I do.
May I grab that copy from you? Thank you. And I'm taking People's 8 and witnesses copies of People's 8 and show them to go down. And Your Honor, may I approach the court with People's 8?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I will return the witness's copy. Sorry. Regarding the Ford Focus ACM, you said that you were able to recover information from this vehicle as well, correct?
Yes, sir, but this is the Ford Escape.
I'm sorry. Is that the Ford Escape?
It is.
This is the Ford Escape.
You'll forgive me, Judge, I'll mark as people's proposed 9, the CDR for the Ford Focus. All right, Rachel Williams,
Yes.
you recognize those people on people's proposed 9?
I do.
All right, and there was any material alterations, changes from last you saw that document?
No.
All right. People move for the admission of people's 9? No. Judge.
It'll be received.
You do have copies of people's
I do.
9? And again, just for the record, I didn't show Mr. O'Donnell, the witness copy of people's 9. And may I publish people's 9 report?
Yes, please.
Likewise, I'll return
Thank you.
the witness copy. Second, ACM in this particular, in the Ford Focus, this gives pre-crash data as well, correct?
Correct.
Now, does the ACM for the Ford Focus also record other information like seatbelts and whether they were buckled?
It does.
Right, and specifically, I'm looking at page 3.
Yes.
Well, let me ask this, how many records did you recover from the Ford Focus?
Looks like only one.
All right, and so for the one record that you that was listed in the ACM down or image for the Ford Focus, at page 3, does it indicate whether the driver's seatbelt was buckled?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and at what line of data, how is it described at page 3?
It would be underneath system status at event. And it would be line 5,
And what's listed there at line 5?
where it says driver seatbelt switch circuit status at algorithm wake up.
And when it says algorithm wake up, what does that mean?
Basically, it's one of the processors inside the airbag control module says, say, something's going wrong. We need to look at firing the airbags.
And when it says the seatbelt switch circuit, what does that mean?
Basically, there's a processor inside the microchip inside the seatbelt that tells, I'm sorry, the seatbelt stock that would come out of the side of the driver's seat and tells if there's a buckle in there or not.
And what is the status of the driver's seatbelt switch circuit status at algorithm wake up?
Buckled.
Now, does it also give a similar switch circuit status for the passenger seatbelt?
It does.
Is that in the same section of system status at event?
Yes.
About what line do you see it?
I think it's 9.
And what does line 9 reflect as the passenger seatbelt switch circuit status at algorithm wake up?
Buckled.
Thank you. No further questions, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell.
Good afternoon, Counselor.
You are a detective?
Road Sergeant.
Road sergeant, okay. Sergeant, when you were discussing the quality of the crash data you recovered, in response to a question by the prosecutor, you said it was reliable, generally.
Yes.
So then, if that is the case, what are the assumptions built into that qualifier of reliable generally?
Well, if the vehicle loses power, if I could refer back to the actual CDR image. If we go to page 11, where it's the second column, where it says vehicle event recorder status. Through the whole entire 4.9 seconds from negative 5.0 down to negative 0.1 seconds, it says complete. So that would determine for me that there was no miscommunication with this module.
And when asked to comment on the reliability of the speed of the vehicle data, on table 11, which could be anywhere from 65 to 70, you said it was probably. What are some of the factors that could cause that speed assessment to be incorrect?
Different transmission gears. If, the transmission was swapped out. Different size rims and tires. If people put different, if they stretch the tire out or make the rim smaller or larger, that can affect.
Okay,
speed.
and did you examine the tires and rims on this car to determine if they were the standard product or something different?
I did.
And
There was a different tire size on there.
And how does that different tire size affect either the recording generally or the recording specifically with respect to speed?
It really didn't, maybe a mile per hour. He didn't extend, so he put a different width tire on, but not a different rim size.
Not a different circumference.
Correct. So that's still the over the ground speed. The rim is still 17 inches. So it is still rotating the same circumference as a 17-inch rim.
All right. Just a moment, John.
Yes.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you. Sergeant, thank you for coming in this afternoon. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, we call Corporal Keith Haynes.
First and last name stated and then spell it, please.
Corporal Keith Haynes, KeithHaynes.
You swear affirm testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Come up here, please. Have a seat in this purple chair. Mary Ann's taking down your testimony. For some reason, she's unable to hear you. I'll ask you to either raise your voice or pull the microphone closer, okay?
Yes,
Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes, please.
Sir, please state and spell your name.
Corporal Keith Haynes, KeithHaynes.
What do you do for a living?
I work for the Romulus Police Department in the Traffic Bureau, and
Go ahead.
the predominant portion of my job is made up doing accident investigation work
How long have you been working for the Romulus Police Department in total?
since 2009,
And in the Traffic Bureau?
2017.
Corporal, were you involved in the investigation of a fatal crash that occurred on September 22nd, 2021 at Middle Belt and Goddard in the city of Romulus?
Yes,
What was your role in the investigation of this fatal crash?
I'm the officer in charge of the investigation.
And as the officer in charge, can you just briefly describe to the judge what your duties were?
Yes, so Your Honor, I was notified of this accident from home, responded, after everything was basically handled, and just had oversight of the scene once I arrived, made contact with a medical examiner, and then after the documentation of the scene was complete, and the vehicles were removed from the roadway, et cetera, then we began, documenting the investigation in the several hundred-page report.
So you indicated that you did make this scene
I did.
on the
yes.
night in question, September 22nd.
Yes.
Corporal, I'm going to put up on the screen what's already been admitted as People's 5. If you could just direct your attention to the screen in the courtroom. Do you recognize what's depicted in the photo?
I do.
Okay, now, if you could, if you know, based on your involvement as the officer in charge, can you describe to me in terms of the lanes of traffic, the number of lanes, what's depicted on this photo?
So you're looking at a photo of vehicles 1 and 3 in the center turn lane within the boundaries of Middle Belt Road. And those vehicles are, the nose of both vehicles, the grille, the headlights are facing southeast in direction. And then you'll see some debris from those vehicles on the roadway as well.
Do you see where my cursor is pointed here?
I do.
Do you know what direction of travel my cursor depicts? If the vehicles are in that lane where my cursor is, what direction are they supposed to be traveling?
Northbound.
And do you know if there's 1 or 2 lanes that are set aside for northbound traffic?
There are 2 lanes designated for northbound travel.
And this is Middle Belt Road, correct?
Yes.
Do you see where my cursor is here?
Yes.
What direction of travel is that designated for on Middle Belt?
Those are 2 lanes and they are both designated for southbound travel.
And do you see where my cursor is here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what does that indicate?
That is a continuous center left turn lane. And that can be used for either north or southbound traffic. In this immediate area, I don't think that that center turn lane has any really applicable. It's not applicable to the roadway in that specific area because I don't believe there's any open establishment. So vehicles likely wouldn't be routinely using that lane to make left-hand turns. In the background there is the airport. There's no serviceable driveway, apron, or area of approach. And then, which I'm referring to the west side of the photo, that building with the lights on.
West side of the photo, right here where my cursor is.
Yes, ma'am.
This is the airport.
Correct.
Okay, continue.
And there are, to the best of my recollection, either no and or extremely limited areas of approach or egress on the other side of the road as well,
Okay.
the east side.
So based on what you've testified to, this picture depicts about exactly 5 lanes of travel.
Precisely.
Do you know, Corporal, what the speed limit is on Middle Belt Road?
45 miles per hour.
Is it posted?
It is.
Just a moment, Judge.
Yes, ma'am.
So you indicated, Corporal, that you made the scene on the night in question, right?
Yes.
What happens when you get there?
When I arrive on scene, I believe that most of the fire department personnel was providing only scene securement at that time, that they have essentially finished rendering of aid to those who would have been most likely to receive it. And then I conferred with, I believe, Detective Perkins, who was kind of in charge, for lack of better terms, of the scene. He gave me a briefing of the scene, and then I kind of facilitated the direction of the assistant accident investigators, the people that are going to help me take photographs of the scene, the people that are going to use the laser measuring equipment to take measurements of it, to provide 2-scale diagrams.
Do you recall, Corporal, if there was any evidence of braking in the roadway?
I don't recall evidence of braking in the roadway, no.
Do you recall the road conditions?
Yes.
Can you describe them for me?
The road conditions were wet. It was extremely windy and blowing rain when I arrived. It was, even hard to keep our raincoats on us. And I mean, for brief periods of time, we were experiencing like standing water on the roadway. The rain was some of the heaviest rain I've ever seen in my life for some period of time.
Do you recall about how long it takes you to make this scene after you first learn of the fatal crash?
I don't, but I think it's safe to assume about an hour.
Do you recall what the light conditions are at this particular location that you made?
I would describe the lighting as poor. The only lighting that's really available in that area is going to be the ambient light from the airport that's put off. That was really only prominent that evening because of the cloud cover and how the clouds assist in the carrying of light. But the roadway more specifically is an unlit roadway. There are no provided streetlights for it.
Corporal, did you ever come in contact with an individual that you know by the name of Robert Merritt?
Not on scene, ma'am, no.
At any point during your investigation as the officer in charge, did you ever come into a contact with an individual by the name of Robert Merritt?
Yes, on Christmas Eve during an interview at the Romulus Police Department.
Do you recognize this individual that you had contact with on Christmas Eve as an individual being in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Could you please indicate for the judge where he's seated?
Mr. Merritt is seated directly behind the counselor.
What is he
next-
wearing?
A maroon suit.
Judge, for the record, may the record reflect that he's identified the defendant, Robert Merritt.
Yes, ma'am.
You indicated that you had contact with the defendant on Christmas Eve. Where were you?
We were in one of the interview rooms at the Romulus Police Department.
Okay. And why is it that you had this occasion to speak with the defendant?
I believe it was because he turned himself in on the approved charges.
Okay. And did you speak with him?
Yes, ma'am.
Prior to speaking with him, did you advise him of anything?
He was advised of his Miranda rights.
Do you recall if there was a document that memorialized that he was advised of his Miranda rights?
Yes, there is a document that memorializes that. Further, it contains his signature indicating that he read and understood and waived those rights.
Would you recognize that document if I showed it to you here today?
Yes.
Judge, at this time, I'm prepared to stipulate that my client was advised of his Miranda rights and waived them.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Judge, for the record, I've shown the defense counsel what is titled Romulus Police Department Miranda Warnings, which will be, which I've pre-marked as People's 10. Your Honor, may I approach Corporal Haynes?
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I just handed you a document. What is that document?
This is the Romulus Police Department Miranda warning form.
And is this the Miranda form that you just testified to was presented to Mr. Merritt on the date in question when you interrogated him?
Yes.
Is there a date on this form?
Yes.
What's the date?
December 24th, 2021 at 9:32 a.m.
Judge, given that Mr. O'Donnell is willing to stipulate that he was properly Mirandized, I move for the admission of People's 10.
No objection.
It'll be received. Thank you.
Judge, may I retrieve that from the corporal and present it to you?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
After you advised Mr. Merritt of his Miranda rights, what happens next?
I began asking him direct questions about the incident.
Do you recall, do you remember what you asked initially?
No, not initially. I don't remember the first set of questions.
Do you recall if this interview, if this interrogation was recorded?
Yes.
Do you recall asking him about whether or not he had been driving on September 22nd, 2021?
Yes.
Do you remember what he said?
Mr. Merritt indicated that he was driving, operating his motor vehicle, the Dodge Avenger.
Do you recall if you asked Mr. Merritt about whether or not he had consumed any alcohol prior to getting behind the wheel on that day?
Yes.
You asked him about that?
Yes.
What do you remember his response was? And Judge, actually, excuse me, Corporal, do you remember, before you answer that question, do you remember if you authored a supplemental report that memorialized your interrogation of Mr. Merritt?
I did.
Would reviewing that report assist you in in answering these questions with respect to this interrogation?
Surely.
Judge, for the record, I'm going to show defense counsel a copy of the supplemental report.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with his supplemental?
Yes, ma'am.
Corporal, I just handed you a document. Please take a moment to look through it and let me know if you recognize what this document is that I just handed you.
This is the report that I would have wrote documenting the interview with Mr. Merritt.
That you would have wrote or that you did write?
That I did write, excuse me.
Okay, and I just asked you about whether or not you asked Mr. Merritt about whether he consumed any alcohol prior to getting behind the wheel. Taking a look at that report, refresh your recollection as to what Mr. Merritt said in response to that question.
Yes, Mr. Merritt.
So hang on. If it would refresh your memory, please take a look at the report, and once you're ready, look up and turn the report over.
I'm ready.
Okay, what did Mr. Merritt say in response to that question about consuming alcohol?
Mr. Merritt indicated that at approximately his lunchtime, and then notated that would have been around 2 or 3 p.m., he and several unknown or unnamed coworkers attended an establishment which I presume to be Woodside Meadows Golf Course and Bar near the area of King and Inkster. That's appropriate to.
Let me stop you there. Why did you presume that to be the location?
I was about to note, he didn't label it as Woodside. Saying, so I'm getting confused with their own apartment complexes. The golf course bar at the intersection of King and Inkster. He did not indicate it by way of business name, but that's the only place in the area that, as he specifically identified, was a golf course, a bar, and restaurant. It's the only place that aligns with his statement.
Okay, please continue with respect to you said at lunchtime, he indicated to you that he had consumed alcohol, or what was the significance of lunchtime?
They went to lunch at this establishment in that area that I am presuming to be that golf course, Woodside, and that he consumed a beer and said that words to the effect of perhaps somebody else consumed 1 shot.
Do you remember if he said anything else about specifically what he can recall drinking on the date of the incident?
I don't.
Okay. But he did indicate to you that he consumed a beer.
Yes.
Do you remember throughout your questioning of Mr. Merritt, if he had any recollection about where he was driving on the night in question?
He did.
I missed where he was.
Driving on the night in question.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I have recollection of that.
What did Mr. Merritt say?
Mr. Merritt indicated that he was driving his vehicle on Eureka Road and that he had made a left onto Middle Belt Road.
Did Mr. Merritt disclose to you anything about speaking with anyone while driving on that day?
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
Mr. Merritt indicated that he was speaking to his wife on his cell phone by way of using the speakerphone.
He indicated that he was on the phone while he was driving.
Correct.
Do you remember if you asked Mr. Merritt what he could remember about the weather on that day? Or if he made any comment about the weather on that day?
The weather was referenced several times during the interview, but to put quotes around one statement, Mr. Merritt indicated that it was raining, quote unquote, cats and dogs, end quote.
Did you ever ask Mr. Merritt specifically about the fatal crash that occurred on September 22nd, 2021?
Yes.
Do you remember what he said in response to your questioning about the crash?
Just that it was an unfortunate incident for all of those that were involved, himself included, and that, he really didn't remember the crash itself, that he could only remember being on speakerphone with his wife, traveling northbound, and those are his words, not mine, traveling northbound on Middle Belt Road from Eureka. And that during that conversation with his wife, she had indicated that
So
he
I-
was going to be late picking her up for work.
I don't want you to get into anything that he might have said his wife said. It's inadmissible, but just with respect to what Mr. Merritt said himself during the interrogation, you said that he admitted that he was driving northbound on Middle Belt.
Yes,
He indicated to you that he does not remember what happened.
that's correct. He has no recollection of how the vehicles came to collide, any three of them.
He didn't say anything to you about hitting a car, remembering hitting a car.
No.
Do you remember at any point in time asking or presenting Mr. Merritt with information that related to his speed?
I did.
Do you remember what you said?
I told Mr. Merritt exactly how fast he was traveling.
And do you remember what his response was how fast did you tell Mr. Merritt he was traveling?
I believe that I indicated to him that he was traveling 68/69 miles per hour.
Do you remember what, if anything, Mr. Merritt said in response to you telling him that?
Mr. Merritt confirmed what I told him by way of saying, yup.
I'm sorry, I missed that expression.
Yup, in air quotes, like YUP.
So he didn't fight you on the speed when you told him he was going that fast?
No, ma'am.
Just a moment, please, Judge. Your Honor, nothing further at this time.
Thank you. Your cross, sir.
Prosecutor, could I ask you to put up number 5 again for?
Yes.
Good afternoon, officer.
Good afternoon, sir.
Is that it?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Based on that photo, and based on your investigation of the case, which direction was Mr. Merritt traveling?
I don't think that those questions, they're too, it's not the same answer.
I'm sorry. Before the accident happened, what direction was Mr. Merritt traveling?
Prior to the collision, Mr. Merritt was traveling northbound on Middle Belt Road.
Okay. And as I approach, are these the northbound lanes or these the southbound?
Those are the northbound lanes, sir.
So, do you know how have you reconstructed how it is the cars got to that position? from where they had been traveling prior to the accident?
I'm unclear on what the question is. Sorry.
Yes, so we know that Mr. Merritt was traveling northbound,
Correct.
and we know that the cars that he had contact with were traveling southbound.
Correct.
Do you know how Mr. Merritt's car got from the northbound lane that he was in to this lane, and how those cars ended up, where they ended up in this picture?
I have a pretty good idea. Yes.
Can you explain that? And if you can't, if you need dry diagrams, perhaps we can, I'll have to work on that later, but can you explain that in brief?
Well, in fairness to the court, I would say I want to be very specific in noting that we're really pushing the limitations on where I'm trained at here. There's a couple things that we pair together to come to the conclusion as to how these cars came in the resting area, the resting position that they're in. One is obviously these photos. Two is the video that we have already looked at here today. And then the other one would be the area of impact, which we were able to identify in the roadway. And when we pair all of those things together, I think what you're asking me to tell you is that vehicle number one, the black Dodge Avenger, was traveling northbound in the southbound lanes of Middle Belt Road, at which point in time he struck vehicle number two, the blue Ford.
And if you could tell me, when he had contact with the blue Ford, was it in, I'll use an expression, the curb lane of the southbound lanes, or the lane closest to the turning lane?
So Judge, I would object only because he didn't do the accident reconstruction. He's not trained in accident reconstruction, and Mr. O'Donnell is asking him questions basically to elicit a response with respect to recreating this accident. So I don't know that he'd be able to answer that question.
He was introduced to me as an accident investigator. He's been doing that since at least 2009. So I thought this would be within his area of competence. If it's not, I'll accept that.
It's 2009 with Romulus, 2017 with traffic.
Yes.
Objections overruled. I'll allow him to respond.
A lot of talk there. One more time with the
Yeah.
question.
You know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you something right now, a very crude.
Well, you can just show him. We have I'd rather use the scene sketch. Let's use the scene sketch.
You have a scene sketch?
Yes.
So why didn't we lead with that if you,
I didn't know if it was available.
it's fine.
I was prepared to give one of my sterling drawings.
Well, you can actually
Yeah,
draw,
legal
you can
pad.
actually draw on that. I just don't know how. But while she's looking for that diagram, your question to Corporal Haynes was regarding the blue Focus being in the curb or the far west southbound lane.
Yes, Judge, that's where I was going, and I was trying to see from that point of impact, if that's what the testimony is, where did they end up? And if that's where they ended up, if he has any explanation for that. I'm just trying to get an understanding of the accident.
And I'm not trying to nitpick your question. I'm confused as to what you're trying to understand. Are you trying to understand, do you not understand where they ended up? Because that's the resting position. So
Correct.
that's where they ended up.
Right. I wanted.
You want to know, are you asking me where the initial contact occurred?
I want to know where you believe the Dodge Avenger was before it crossed the yellow line, the center line, and then where it made contact with the blue Ford Focus, if you can do that. If you can't do that, then I'll accept that you can't.
Where the Dodge Avenger was before it crossed the center line?
Correct, if you know that.
I don't know that. I'd have to presume it was in the northbound lanes of travel before it
You know,
proceeded.
I realize there's two lanes of travel, so I was trying to figure out, was it in the centermost lane going north?
Now I understand your question. I don't know the answer to that.
Scroll down.
By the way, in your testimony, you said that there were no, I forget what term you used, but brake marks on the road. Is that correct?
Evidence of braking, yes.
Okay. And could that be at all affected by the fact that you described it as being howling winds and driving rain?
It very well could have been.
All right. I'll begin with, and I'm going to show the witness a picture given to me by the prosecutor of the crash scene. Does that fairly reflect the crash scene?
It does. That reflects the resting position
Okay,
of those vehicles upon my arrival.
all right. And the car that is black, that would be the
Vehicle 1, the Dodge
Dodge
Avenger.
Avenger. The vehicle that is white is the,
Ford Escape, Vehicle 3.
and the vehicle that is far off past the curb lane on the west side.
No.
On the west side, that is the
That's the blue Ford.
Ford Focus,
Yes, sir. Vehicle 1.
Okay.
Excuse me. Vehicle 2.
vehicle 2. All right. Judge, having that explained to me, I'm going to leave it.
Thank you.
In your conversation, your interrogation with Mr. Merritt, you said that you characterized it as an unfortunate incident, correct?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And in doing so, he made mention not just of himself, but for the family
That's correct. Yes, sir.
of the person who was killed, correct?
Yes, sir.
Second of all, you said that he responded with the word yup when you said 68. First of all, prior to that, you said that he had no recollection of the event, correct, or the crash.
Both of those are accurate.
Okay. So it's fair to say that he may have had no recollection of what his speed was, correct?
Correct.
So when he was saying yup, he might have just been agreeing that you found that the speed was 68, because you said that, correct?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Your Honor, just a moment.
Yes, sir.
By the way, you said that he was talking on the cell phone using a speakerphone, correct? Or the speakerphone aspect of the cell phone?
That is what Mr. Merritt indicated to me.
And either from Mr. Merritt or from officers you talked to at the scene, you understand that he was talking to his wife, correct?
Yes.
And he told you in that interrogation that he was on his way to the airport to pick up his wife from work, correct?
Yes.
Just a moment. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect, ma'am?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Corporal Haynes, thank you very much. You may step down. Your next witness, ma'am.
It's in this. I'll resend it. Your Honor, with that, people do not have any more witnesses.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Judge, we are calling no witnesses at the preliminary exam.
thank you. Argument.
Your Honor, as you know, Mr. Merritt is charged with count 1, homicide, murder, second degree, count 2, operating while intoxicated causing death, and count 3, reckless driving causing death. In order for us to establish count 1, that Mr. Merritt is in order for us to establish count 1, Your Honor, we have to show that Mr. Merritt caused the death of Mia Howard and that he did so with malice. In order for us to prove malice, Your Honor, we could either show one of 3 things: that he intended to kill, that he intended to cause great bodily harm, or that he engaged in wanton conduct. And in this case, Judge, what we have here are a number of aggravating factors that rise to the level of malice in this case. First, we know, Your Honor, from the testimony from the witnesses, we know that it's dark outside. We know that at the time this happened, it was about just after 8 o'clock in the evening. Second, Your Honor, we know that the posted speed limit on Middle Belt is 45 miles per hour, and that third, Judge, Mr. Merritt was traveling at 68 miles per hour, 5 seconds before impact, and through the testimony that was established, he never at any point in time braked. Fourth, Your Honor, through stipulation, we have established that his blood alcohol content was 0.14 milliliters per blood. Judge, we also heard testimony that Mr. Merritt was on the phone while he was driving. He was distracted. He knew he was going to be late to pick up his wife from the airport, and he's on the phone, distracted. Sixth, Judge, we have testimony that on the day in question, the ground was wet. It had been raining on and off, and yet he's still going this fast at this point in time, it being dark. Seventh, Judge, he blacks out. He doesn't remember what happened. Mr. Corporal Haynes testified that throughout the course of his interrogation, Mr. Merritt wasn't able to recall how this happened. This is an indicator that, Judge, he was so far gone, as they say, that he couldn't even recollect the crash. And so, Judge, going through the exhibits, we saw on the exhibit that was admitted that Mr. Merritt is traveling, he's initially going northbound on Middle Belt, crosses over the center lane, that middle lane, and hits the vehicle, the blue Ford Focus, head on. And Your Honor, you saw the photos of the cars, and it shows the extensive damage. One of the things that Your Honor is to consider in order for us to establish that he acted with malice is whether or not there was evidence of aggressive driving. And we heard through our witness, the first witness, Joseph Solaski, that Mr. Merritt had been essentially tailgating him, had been weaving in and out of lanes, that Mr. Solaski had let him pass because he was going faster than the speed limit, which Mr. Solaski remembers that he was traveling. All that, Judge, we believe proves that Mr. Merritt was acting in a way that was a complete disregard for the likelihood of his actions that were going to cause this death. Judge, malice may be implied when the defendant doesn't act with the high probability that it will result in death. And this is what we believe these main factors set out. With respect to count 2, Judge, I don't think there's a question here that he was operating while intoxicated and at the time of this incident, and that caused the death. With respect to count 3, Your Honor, with reckless driving causing death, once again, we have the aggressive driving, we have him going over the speed limit, we have him driving drunk, and that caused Mia Howard's death. As far, I will reserve any further argument, Judge, for rebuttal.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Your Honor, I'm going to agree with the prosecutor and say that with respect to counts 2 and 3, there is probable cause and there are facts sufficient that this matter should be taken to a trier of fact for further discussion, if necessary. So I'm going to ask the court to think very carefully about count 1, and I'm going to argue that that count should be dismissed. The elements of murder 2 are death caused by an act of the defendant with malice, that's the third element, and without justification or excuse. case that I'm going to talk about in a moment, a Supreme Court case called Gecky, says that malice requires egregious circumstances, outrageously bad and shocking. The word egregious could be defined, and I could go to a dictionary to define that. But I think the only useful way to understand what egregious behavior is to look at other cases where the court has found murder to egregious or bad behavior. So I'm going to talk about a case called Werner at 254 Michigan Ave, 528. And in that case, the defendant was found guilty of murder in the second degree by drunk driving. He was going the wrong direction on a busy highway. He had had a recent episode of alcohol and driving where he had blacked out, and he knew about that. And the court knew about that, and that became part of the facts. He had an induced blackout while driving, and nonetheless, he drank heavily again and went out in this vehicle. The prosecution showed that the defendant knew heavy drinking could lead to a blackout, and blackout could lead to driving without any understanding of what he was doing. This incident of blackout occurred 3 weeks before the drunk driving incident that led to a death. From that case, Gecky, which is at 457 Michigan 442, I'm going to quote from what I believe to be approximately 456 of that, to give you a flavor for a definition of what could be egregious driving that would amount to malice that the court would have to find in order to find murder too. Evidence, quoting from that case, evidence adduced at the preliminary examination established that a death occurred. That's obviously element 1. Caused by an act of the defendant, element 2. The defendant probably possessed the mental state with respect to actus reus. The defendant evaded the police while drinking alcohol in a liquor store parking lot. He had been drinking in a liquor store parking lot. He saw the police. He drove away to avoid that police officer, then went back and continued to drive. This permitted the inference that the defendant was aware of his level of intoxication. There's no proof of that in this case, Your Honor. That despite such awareness, defendant drove recklessly at high speeds along a main artery in the city of Pontiac. That the defendant was aware of the extent of his impairment, and then that became in that case apparent during conversations at the scene of the accident, in conversations with police officers. He acknowledged that he was aware of how drunk he was. The defendant was aware of the extent of his impairment, the lack of control, having narrowly missed hitting another vehicle. So while driving prior to the accident, he almost hits another vehicle, yet still continued to speed through at least one red traffic light before colliding with the victim's car. Taken together, the court says, he was drunk, speeding in the middle of the city. His lack of self-control caused him to narrowly miss striking a vehicle. He thereafter ran through a stoplight, struck another vehicle, killed its occupant. Shortly after the accident, again quoting from the court, defendant was heard saying that he knew he should not have been driving, and the accident was all his fault, and he was driving too fast and was too drunk to drive. Judge, those are the parameters and indicators of egregious actions. And those are what equals malice. You do not have that here. In this case, he was driving. He was under the influence of alcohol. He was going to pick up his wife. He was not out crazy driving, driving, narrowly missing other people, going through red lights. All those other factors that give the context behind a finding that court would need to find someone guilty of murder in the second degree caused by drunk driving. Judge, for those reasons, I'd ask the court not to bind over on the first count, murder 2 in the second degree. Thank you.
Judge, so let's talk about what we know. Mr. O'Donnell cited a couple cases, and they're cases that actually I'm going to use in responding to his argument. Mr. O'Donnell conceded that, and we concede that malice does require us to show egregious circumstances. That is from People v. Gecky 457, Mish 442, a 1998 case. And the Supreme Court said in that case that in order for us to show murder two, in order for us to show the intent to, in order for us to show that Mr. Merritt, and this is the quote from the jury instructions, knowingly created a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or such harm would be the likely result of his actions. That's what we have to show. The court in Gecky says that these murder two cases involve a level of misconduct that goes beyond that of drunk driving. And what we have here is conduct that goes beyond the level of drunk driving. It wasn't simply the case that Mr. Merritt blew a .14 and that's all we have and he collided with another car. Judge, we have conduct that amounts to egregious circumstances. We heard from our first witness, again, that testified to the manner in which Mr. Merritt was driving before he struck and killed Mia Howard in her blue Ford Focus. He was driving erratically. He was going above the speed limit. He crossed over the center lane and hit her head on, Judge. So you have aggressive driving here. And you have also, so Mr. O'Donnell said there was no evidence of a near collision. That's not true because we heard from Miss Rhea, who was our second witness, that she saw the car in front of her veer to the left over to the center lane in order to avoid Mr. Merritt's oncoming car. So that is a near collision with potentially two vehicles. One being that first car that Miss Rhea testified to going over to the left, going into that center lane. And the second car being Miss Rhea's car, but she ended up hit anyways, Judge. So there's another factor. He hit another car. Not only did he strike one car and kill the driver, he hit Miss Rhea's car. He hit two cars. He almost hit another car that was traveling in front of Miss Rhea's car. And again, Judge, he's crossing over the center lane and hitting this first vehicle and killing the driver head on. This is not just drunk driving, Judge. This is a case where he showed aggressive driving before the crash, and in the manner in which this crash happened is also particularly egregious. With respect to the road conditions and how dark it was outside, Judge, you got him driving drunk at nighttime in an unlighted roadway. And you also have him on the phone with his wife, worried, distracted, concerned about picking her up late from the airport. Throughout the testimony, we established that his speed, again, Your Honor, was 68 miles per hour, 5 seconds before. He never braked. There was no evidence of braking in the roadway. And the posted speed limit on Middle Belt is 45 miles per hour. Again, Judge, this is conduct that goes beyond the level of drunk driving. We also heard from witnesses, Your Honor, particularly Corporal Haynes, that it was windy on that day, that at times during the processing of the scene, they couldn't keep, I think he said, his hats on or their jackets on. So it's the weather is particularly bad. You're driving well above the speed limit, drunk, when it's dark outside, it's windy outside, you're on the phone distracted, and you almost hit one car, you hit another one head on, going the wrong way, and you hit a second car, and that was Miss Rhea's car, Judge. So Gecky says, as I indicated, that these cases require a level of misconduct that goes beyond that of drunk driving. And I submit to you, Judge, that based on the standard that we're here to present to you, Judge, that probable cause standard, that we've submitted evidence that there is probable cause to bind him over on that murder two, that count one. Also in Gecky, Judge, the court says that the legislator made it clear that anybody who drives drunk and causes death is punishable. That's the OWI causing death, which he's conceded. We have established in terms of the probable cause standard that we have here today. But that doesn't prohibit us from, for the reasons stated, moving forward with the murder 2 count based on these egregious circumstances. So at the end of the day, Your Honor, in order for us to show malice, you are to consider all of these aggravating factors when you determine whether or not we've shown malice. And I think based on our standard, what we're here for today, a probable cause hearing, this preliminary exam, that we've submitted evidence that meets that burden of probable cause that shows that Mr. Merritt, in causing the death of Mia Howard, did act in a way that was like that, in a way, as the instructions say, that knowingly created a very high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that such death would be the result of his actions. And I'm renewing the motion to bind him over on count 1.
Thank you, madam. Mary Ann's going to ask, the citation is People versus Gecky, Goeckke.
It's 457, Michigan, 442.
The court has had the opportunity to listen to off-duty firefighter Joseph Selaski, Stephanie Ria, who was also involved in the accident crash, Detective Brian Perkins, Lieutenant Michael Fife, Sergeant Aaron Benares, Corporal Keith Haynes, and review the 10 documents that were received into evidence in this matter. As Madam Prosecutor indicated, Defense Counsel seems to have conceded the bind over of count 2, operated while intoxicated causing death, and count 3, reckless driving causing death. The prosecutor did read from the criminal jury instruction, which is 16.5 regarding second-degree murder. Defense counsel raised the issue of what actually is egregious. Testimony from the 6 witnesses combined together indicate that the firefighter moved out of the way as soon as was practicable to allow the person in the black Avenger to go by them, as they seem to be in a greater hurry than Mr. Selaski. The testimony is that it was raining hard enough, wind blowing hard enough that Corporal Haynes could barely keep his raincoat on. It's raining cats and dogs. That stretch of Middle Belt is very poorly lit, is an understatement, unlit. There's not much to do over there other than driving to or from a place. Mr. Merritt had consumed alcohol 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He's running late to pick up his wife. He's driving anywhere from 65 to 71 miles per hour when you factor in the margin of error that the officer from Trenton testified to. Speeding on the phone, having consumed alcohol on a dimly lit street, that's egregious from this court's perspective. For purposes of the prosecutor, for the standard for this afternoon, at this preliminary examination, the prosecutor has met its burden of probable cause. The defendant will be bound over on all 3 counts. The next step in these proceedings will be an arraignment on the information that will happen at the Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, April 14, 2022 at 9 a.m. Mr. Merritt's previously entered bond with all conditions continues. Anything else from the people?
No, thank you, Judge.
Anything else from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Madam, you have 1 piece of evidence you need to retrieve from this court. We are all set. That concludes this matter for this afternoon. Yes, please. Thank you, ma'am.
Brother Franklin said hello. Philip Franklin said.